You mentioned there was a bullet found in your car.
There was a bullet. It is an old sign of a warning. The stability of the GNU, whether it's great or not, does not impact on the GPU at all. The Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, KZN, owns over 13,000 properties.
13,000
properties in KwaZulu-Natal. And we don't mind that you're a poofter as long as you do the job. South Africans don't care so much about their politicians' private lives as do the Americans, for instance, or the British. Because people just want service delivery.
Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX, and today I'm extremely excited and honored to be joined by the MEC for Public Works and Infrastructure in KZN, Martin Meyer. Thank you so much for joining us on SMWX.
Thank you for having us. It's a new experience for me and I'm very excited.
It's a fascinating position in which you find yourself because we had this watershed election. The provincial leadership got over the line with one vote, I think.
Yeah.
Talk us through what it was like in that moment where suddenly you realize, cool, we've squeaked over the line and presumably your life is going to change being put in such an important position.
Absolutely. I mean, I did not expect to get a executive position. And on the night before the Premier would announce his cabinet, I got a call from the party leadership. And they said, Marty, tomorrow you're being sworn in of MEC as Public Works, which took me quite by surprise.
Wow.
I always tell this funny story that I quickly had a Zoom with my family, my mom and my brother and my family who live in the Eastern Cape, and said, listen, this is going to impact our lives and everything like that. And my mom was quite, I said, Mom, I'm going to be an MEC from tomorrow. And she said, oh, that's nice. How's the weather in Durban? And afterwards, my brother said, Mom doesn't know what an MEC is. You just have to explain it to her first. So she wasn't that dismissed. Now she's very proud of it. But yeah, and then obviously if we step a bit back from that, we had to elect Premier Ntuli as our Premier. We know we only had one vote. And you weren't 100% sure, is everybody going to vote the way they should vote?
I bet.
It was an extremely stressful day for us in the legislative building, electing the Speaker, the Deputy Speaker, who's my wonderful friend, Mabatu Tembe, and the Premier. And once we got over the line, we're like, okay, now it's actual reality. We've got a unity government. And people should remember that the provincial unity government got done long before the national unity government.
True.
While they were still trying to figure out minor details, we were done. We were sitting there, we were electing a Premier. And even being called on stage on the day, it was a very surreal experience. Slight mishap when the Premier announced me as Miss Martin Meyer, but we got over that.
Intriguing.
Yes, I still don't quite know what to make of that.
Yeah.
And then I always tell people that the first thing that happened is, as I stepped off stage after being sworn in by the Chief Justice, is this well-dressed gentleman came to me. He said, I'm the HOD of your department. I said, well, pleasure to meet you. He says, I have to tell you we're broke. And suddenly all the euphoria was gone. This excitement, euphoria, suddenly just gone. I realized, oh, this is real. We've got one big job ahead of us.
Yeah.
And then just rolled up the sleeves and got into it.
Did you feel scared at the time when the first thing the person said to you was, we're broke?
I think that's when reality hit. And I realized, I've said this a few times, opposition is easy. It's very easy to say, I think this is what you should be doing. Now actually in the seat, and you have to now implement those things you've been saying all the years, and you realize it's a lot more complicated than you make it when you're in opposition. So I did feel a bit overwhelmed the first few days or weeks, maybe still a little bit, who knows. And you think, how do I tackle this? And you just come to that old cliches, how you eat an elephant, it's just one piece at a time. And then that's just what we started doing. And it worked. We've achieved amazing things in 6 months in the department. It can still feel a bit overwhelming. And I think the hardest for me was the changes to my life personally as well. Suddenly having people around all the time, people and telling you, no, we have to drive you places, and there's people with guns around my house,
Wow.
Good people, not bad people. They're supposed to be there. But or being recognized now. Walking the shop and suddenly people walk up to you and want to talk to you about public works and government and politics and things like that. And I'm a normally very private person.
Right.
So also the impact it had on my private life was something I had to get used to. And then realizing that I now make decisions that impact 13 million people on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And I try and remind myself of that every time. That this isn't just a decision I'm making in some ivory tower in an office. This decision, this document I'm signing today, directly impacts 13 million people. And even my office in KZN, MECs will get 2 offices, one in Pietermaritzburg, which is our capital, and then you can decide, but most people obviously have the second office in Durban, which is the hub of KZN, and my main office is there. And from my office, you can look onto which is one of the worst informal settlements in Durban, in Cato Manor. And I'm actually in some ways glad it's there, because it reminds me on a daily basis who I work for and what the duty is I have. And it's to the people living in that informal settlement and informal settlements across the province and in everybody else. So that, I think, keeps me grounded. There's a long way to go, but I'm excited. I think South Africa is in a very exciting phase of its democratic life. And, we can talk about whether coalitions works, but I think it is something we need to try if we're going to move forward as a country.
The construction mafia in KZN has been spoken about for a very long time, and it's something that you've come out quite strongly against, to say that you won't negotiate with the construction mafia and that you'll be tackling the construction mafia. Is the construction mafia a real thing?
It is very real, and it's very real in that people have lost their lives. One of the worst examples of a construction mafia in our department in KwaZulu-Natal is a school called Menzi High School in Umlazi. Extremely rundown school, which the department then many years ago with the Department of Education decided to build a brand new wing, modern, world-class type school. That is now 3 years behind schedule, millions of rand, because the construction mafia kept interrupting work. And it got so bad that while school kids were there were shootouts between the construction mafia and security guards and SAPS, putting kids' lives in danger. So it's a very real thing. I must also very proudly say that this school, even though it's a totally dilapidated school, has once again got 100% record for their matrics. So we are really trying to show to the children of that school, listen, but you're doing your bit, the teachers are doing their bit, we as a government need to do our bit and give you a world-class school for you to do even better. So, and we have, even in the private sector, last year, a CEO of a prominent construction company got it. There was a hail of bullets in his car. Famously, there was a bit of an incident with myself when a bullet was found inside my car. So it is something that keeps coming up. It is a very real threat. It's costing us trillions of rands in our economy, not only in KZN, across the country. But I think it's also very important for us to distinguish between business forums, which could be legitimate, and the construction mafia.
Sure.
And we did get some criticism when we said we will sit down with the Black Business Forum, which is or Federation, which is the biggest representative of business forums in KZN. And people said, but they're part of the problem. And we said, hang on. We said we will talk to everyone that comes to us in a flag of truce. And they did. And we sat down with them and we spoke. And they then stood up and publicly denounced all acts of violence, said that they're against the disruption at construction sites and they're willing to work with us in a legal manner. And we said, but those are the type of people we need to work with, because the fact is we have a responsibility to make sure local communities benefit from our work we do in communities.
Absolutely.
And that some people try to benefit from it themselves, and that's how the construction mafia came up. But there are still legitimate small business people in those communities, in places like Nongoma and Ulundi and wherever, that want to work with us, and they want to work with us in a fair and legal way. So one thing we've, for instance, learned is that we've left engaging with communities way too late. So what we'll do is we'll draw up all the plans for a school, do the whole thing, give it to a contractor, and then say to the contractor, now go talk to the community. And that's too late.
Right.
So what we're now doing is we're going to create we're busy in the process of creating a directorate in the department that just focuses on liaising with communities. And if a year before we even go on ground, let's say the Department of Education says we want to build a school there, then already we will go to the community saying, all right, we're going to need bricklayers. We're going to need all these different types of skills. If you don't have people with these skills, let's start training them now. So that by the time we come on site, you have the right people. Let's help you register your businesses. We'll bring in SARS, we'll bring in Home Affairs, we'll bring in whoever, and we'll help you register your business. So by the time subcontractors need to bid, you can do so. We will even help you fill in the bid documents, because those things are terribly complicated. And that way we will close the door on the construction mafia. So there's no space for them to go in. And the community will then take ownership of these building sites. And we think really that's the right way for us to go in tackling this matter.
You mentioned there was a bullet found in your car. Forgive me, I didn't see that.
It's a story. Steve is going to be angry at me for mentioning it, but
Steve, we love Steve anyway, so he brought you here.
No, it was just a few months ago. The media did a bit of much about it. That there was a bullet. It's an old sign of a warning that was found in my official vehicle, but that's a matter of investigation. So I don't get intimidated easily. So.
How did it make you feel when you found it there?
Well, first I was just confused, to be honest. Trying to figure out what's happening here. But no, I mean, every now and then, the crime intelligence, we will contact you and discuss threats and stuff like that. And there's something I had to get my head around. But something I feel very strongly about, and this is not purely a soundbite, is KZN is a dangerous place. Last year, a teacher got shot in a classroom. People get shot going to work every day in our province, unfortunately. Our responsibility as a cabinet in the national unity government or the provincial unity government is to make everyone safe, not just me. My situation is not unique. It's a situation that millions of people in KZN go through on a daily basis. And then the other very important thing for me is that this is a country that overcame one of the most evil regimes in the world. And we did so without fear. People stood up. I was only 17 when it happened, so I didn't have any part in it. But people stood up and won in a peaceful way a war against an extremely powerful state. If we could defeat them as a nation, we can defeat criminals like the Construction Mafia. We just stand together, because the vast majority, 99.99% of South Africans are good, honest people that just want to build a better life for themselves and their children. And if we stand together against criminals like the Construction Mafia, the Water Mafia, now there's organized crime almost in every field that government works in. If we stand together against people like that, then we can overcome them. And therefore, good people have to stand up and say, this is the line we've drawn in the sand, and you cannot cross that line anymore. Because we cannot live in a country where government is intimidated. We cannot. I mean, if government starts being intimidated by people, then something is seriously wrong in our democracy. So we as a unity government, and we have the backing now of the national government as well. Minister McPherson has spoken up strongly. The Minister of Police, the President himself has spoken up strongly against us now. So I think finally now there's a political will to deal with things like the Construction Mafia, and we cannot back out in fear. My life is not more important than the lives of any other South African and citizen of KwaZulu-Natal.
I appreciate you shedding light on that, because often we see public figures and politicians as these unfeeling, unemotional, unflinching figures who we expect things from, and we expect them now, But we also don't know as a citizenry what you go through when you get into those offices, and what it's like when you get there, and the kinds of threats that you might face. And maybe there's just a need for there to be more understanding, both from citizens and politicians and public officials, that it's not easy for any of us often, because we live in a broken country where we all face things that we shouldn't be facing.
Absolutely. And I mean, I opened up to Tlanganani, who's sitting there, who's my head of ministry, the other day, that for me, the biggest fear is, let's say someone does attack me, and I don't think it's going to happen, but let's say there is attack, and I'm with a friend or someone who gets, I chose this life, but not the people around me, my loved ones didn't choose this life.
Sure.
So I'm willing to take this risk. I went in this with my eyes open. I knew what the risks are when I took this position. But I'm very worried about the people around me. That is something that is a big concern. But on a lighter note, you also have to see the lighter note. A while back, I was walking my dogs, and suddenly a white polo just stopped. It was 5 o'clock in the morning. It was still dark, and this white polo just stopped right next to me. Now immediately you started getting a suspicion. White polo has got a bit of a reputation. And this guy opened the window, and it was quite an angry-looking person. He said, MEC Meyer. So I was like, okay, this is how it's going to happen.
This is it.
I'm going to die on the side of the road.
Yeah, it's been great being alive.
So, and I even dropped the leashes on my dogs. At least they can run to safety,
I like that you protected your dog.
That's all I could do. And this guy said, MEC Meyer. So I was like, yes. And he said, you're doing a great job. Keep going. And he drove off. I was quite upset with him, to be honest, but also grateful that he felt he should tell me that. But those are the type of things that, we do realize that you don't always understand how this impacts on yourself as a person. But I also do think there's two things that need to happen here. We as politicians need to be a lot more ourselves towards the people of South Africa. I think the days of politicians having this image and trying to project a specific image is gone. We see the world over, people are turning against traditional political parties and all of that because they feel this total disconnect between the leaders and themselves. And they don't think people are sincere. And I think sincerity is a very important thing that we've lost as leaders and as politicians in this country. But on the other hand of that is also true. And I see that I was a ward councillor. That's how I started in politics. One of the hardest jobs in the world is being a ward councillor in South Africa. I can tell you that. And the expectations people have of you is so high. And I think it's also important for people in South Africa to understand that politicians are also people. We have fears, we have families and all those things as well. And I think if we start being more open about it and people will then come to that understanding as well.
It's so funny because I interview politicians for a living.
Yes, yeah.
And I've interviewed them on mainstream platforms, and there, in many ways, it almost facilitates the artificial politician, because you don't ask anything about them. You say, well, why aren't you doing this, this, and that? And then I've realized over time, politicians actually lose touch with their own emotional reality.
Absolutely.
And on this platform, I'm so glad you were able to speak about personal experiences, but I'll be like, what was that like for you? And they'll be like, no, but our policy is this, this, and that. And I'll ask again, I'll be like, what was that like for you? They're like, no, our policy is. And that creates a disconnect between people and politicians, because you're like, this person is not a breathing, thinking human being like me. They're just a policy wonk.
Yeah. And we don't want AI to run the country, we don't want robots to run the country. No, I think it's very important. At the end of the day, we represent people. We can only do that with people ourselves. And again, I think my roots in social work, played a big role in that. That day, my job was literally to just sit down and listen to people. And I think that's the other important thing is, and I'm saying that talking a lot today, so it's a bit ironic, but we've got an excellent
talk on this in this interview.
But we've become excellent at talking. We've become quite rubbish at listening.
Absolutely.
And I think that's one of the challenges South Africa face, and why certain political parties might have lost a lot of support, is that people just feel, but no one listens to us. And I often say that to new councillors who get elected as ward councillors. And they say, but people are shouting at me. It's like, well, you picked up the phone, which means someone is actually listening to them. And they're so frustrated that frustration just boils over. And it's not easy for us to be sworn at and all of that. But I think it's very important to understand people are so frustrated. They just want someone to hear us, just someone that's listening to us. And I think if we start doing that as leaders in this country, I think we will move ions forward in trying to break away that disconnect that we currently see between the government in our country and in our provinces and the people on the ground.
I'm interested in when you said being a ward councillor is one of the toughest jobs. Why do you think that?
You are really the coalface. You are really there for people's service delivery issues. And people don't always distinguish what is national government mandate and what is provincial government, what is local government. So my kid couldn't get into a school today. I voted for you. You, my ward councillor. What are you going to do about it? And unfortunately, we see the situation, and you living in Johannesburg will know better than me, where our local government is breaking down. Services is at its lowest point, I think, ever in many of our municipalities. And people want answers from the person that they elected for. And that's not unfair. I've made a cross behind a specific name. It's the only directly elected people in our country is our ward councillors. So I expect answers from that person. I do understand.
Absolutely.
The sad part is the council doesn't always have the answers because it's part of a much bigger system. So it becomes really, really hard. And you see heartbreaking things as a ward councillor, and you really try your best to deliver services, but your hands are tied by the laws and the regulations and all of that. So I can honestly say, even being an MEC, I can tell you being a ward councillor is harder.
No, that's interesting. And I was thinking about this question of the different spheres of government with your portfolio, because of course with the Durban beachfront, this seems to be the big question around, KZN at the moment. But of course, that's involved in a tangle between local government, provincial, maybe national, I don't even know. Can you talk us through that crisis?
Absolutely.
And what it is that you are able to do to play a role in resolving it?
Yeah. So I think one thing that we have to start off with is that KZN never had a department for infrastructure. We had a public works department that was linked to the human settlements department, and we were the only province that didn't have a specific department looking at infrastructure. So it's brand new that the unity government decided to do.
Okay.
So we're still carving out our role and trying to find, because people do get a bit confused. We don't build the roads, that's still done by transport. So we're still trying to figure out exactly where it is.
Sure.
But one of the things that we say to ourselves is that, but we have to play a much more supportive role to our local municipalities as well. Because local government is responsible for almost 80% of infrastructure in the country, not national government and the provincial government.
Yeah.
And water provision, where we have a huge crisis, is in one part local government. Stormwater, sewage, which is a major crisis in South Africa.
Yeah.
Some of the roads and all of that. So what we're now trying to do is we're setting up what we're calling the Infrastructure Advisory Board. We're bringing experts from water engineers, civil engineers, green environment experts, and all of that together. And we're going to say, and then we say to local government, we can't interfere because the constitution is very, very clear on that. But we are willing to help you. So we're going to set up this board, and we want the local municipalities, because eThekwini, and we'll talk about the beach crisis soon.
Sure.
But even your smaller municipalities, we have many small rural, KZN is a largely rural municipality, province. And a small municipality in Umkhanyakude doesn't have the money to employ an engineer.
Sure.
They have to then pay consultants at an exorbitant fee to come and assist them. And we're saying, okay, we can play that role. How can we help local governments to actually now play a better role? Because we often see that municipalities don't spend the grants they get for infrastructure, because they just do not have the capacity to do so. So everybody's angry. You got money from the government, you didn't spend it, and that should never happen. Underspending is as bad as overspending. And we want to help them with that. And the same with eThekwini. The sewage crisis is a major crisis, because it impacts directly on tourism, it impacts people's lives, health, and all those type of things.
Absolutely.
We can't, as a provincial government, now just storm in and say, okay, we're taking over.
Yeah.
There is legal process, you can do that, but we don't want to do that. Which is why our department, the national department, signed an MOU with eThekwini. I had a meeting yesterday again with Mayor Kaba from eThekwini. And we are really now saying, okay, how can we work together? We have some expertise that could assist you. You have some things that can assist us. How can we just work much better together? And it's already, we can already see the benefits of it. For instance, bad buildings is a massive crisis in eThekwini. It's very similar to the Joburg inner city crisis, that we have hijacked buildings, empty buildings, buildings where crime is rife. Some of that belongs to my department, and we can't be part of the problem. Which is, and we'll talk a bit about the conference later, but that's why we're also having our conference to discuss how can we better do those type of things. So we are going to play a much more active role, and we're building relationships with all the municipalities, all the 54 municipalities in KwaZulu-Natal, and say that we don't want to be a big brother, but we want to be part of the solution in building KZN better.
Fam, before we get back to the episode, we just want to let you know we have a big goal on this channel to build this community to 1,000 members. That means we have 2 new levels of SMWX membership. The first level gives you exclusive access to content, discounts on merch, but the second level, in addition to various other perks, gives you access to me. We're going to have meetups, online sessions. You're going to get discount on our live events. So if you want to deepen your SMWX community experience, help us get to that 1,000 member level. Look forward to seeing you there. In office, you've instituted a number of interesting initiatives, and I think it's early, but it's a case study in how people in public office can actually do things differently, I think. And we should raise those up just as we criticize when things are going wrong.
That would be nice.
Yeah, exactly. In a number of things I'm interested in. The one is I read this book many years ago by a Scandinavian economist, which was about how states don't know what assets they have at their disposal, especially property assets. And I was saying that you have started or conducted some kind of register of what buildings do we actually own, and found that you didn't even know what buildings you had, or there were some that you did know that you didn't realize were valuable or invaluable. Talk us through that, because I think that could be a key case study in how other infrastructure units can actually take stock of what they actually have at their disposal.
Absolutely, and we're very proud of what we achieved. And interestingly enough, it's one of the first things I said when I got elected. I think it was on the day I got sworn in, and I said, listen, this department doesn't know what it owns, and we're going to have to do an audit. And a very senior official told me yesterday, he said, I was so angry when I heard you say that. I said, how dare this guy say it? But then we started and we realized, it's actually right. We do own properties we didn't know about, you know. And a couple of things that's very important. We did it fully in-house. We didn't contract it out, as departments used to do. We didn't pay a consultancy firm for it. We did it in-house. We used technology. We developed a kind of an app that made it much quicker and easier for us to do.
Okay.
The Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, KZN, owns over 13,000 properties.
13,000
properties in KwaZulu-Natal.
Wow.
This could be small parcels of open land, buildings, offices, schools, clinics, but it's 13,000 properties.
Wow.
Things happen. And then also, historically, it is that when the province of KwaZulu-Natal got formed, it was part of the old Zululand homeland that got incorporated, properties for national government, and there wasn't proper register. So properties became the ownership of the government, and the government didn't even know about it.
Wow.
And even now, 30 years later, we're finding properties like that. So we've now almost completed that process, and we'll have a big press conference next week where we will open this up to the public and say, because also important to remember, it's not my buildings. It's not the government's buildings. It's the people of KwaZulu-Natal's buildings. It belongs to them, and they need to know what they own, you know, and what is there. So we're very proud of that process, and we did it so effectively that we now have the other provinces, even the national government, contacting us saying, "Okay, how did you do this? Because we need to do the same thing."
Absolutely.
And we think it's a groundbreaking thing. And we have found, unfortunately, I mean, I can't give exact numbers now because we're busy auditing it, but we've really found hundreds of properties. That wasn't on our register previously.
Wow. I mean, it's
bad news is now I have to pay rates on them, but that's another problem I'll face. And now what we said, the reason why we want to do that is that government owns too much. It's another fact. So we're going through a three-phase step. The first thing is we're going to say is, do government need this building?
Yeah, sure.
And I'll take a very good example that we're currently having in Durban, in that we are paying 1.1 billion rand in leases a year, because we do the leases for all government departments in the province. While we own our own buildings. So why are we paying leases if I have a building?
You had hundreds of buildings that you didn't know about, yet you're paying all this money in leases.
Exactly. And we said that's a waste of the money of the people of KwaZulu-Natal. So in Durban, there's a very infamous building called the Esplanade Government Building. Hopefully we'll get a much better name for it once it's completed. It's been standing derelict. It's a massive, huge building right on the Esplanade, beautiful views of the harbour. Built in the 70s by government to host all government departments. It's empty. Right. It's totally derelict.
Sure.
We went into a public-private partnership of tens of millions of rands, hundreds of millions really. That building is going to be upgraded in a totally new public-private partnership model. It will be mixed use. It will have commercial sites, everything like that. So we said to all the departments, once this building is completed, which will have hundreds of offices, we will be cancelling your leases. We won't renew your leases where you are currently.
Excellent.
And all departments will move into this building.
Yeah.
And it will save us a fortune as government.
I was just thinking it's on the one hand, there are probably hidden costs, but there's a huge revenue opportunity, which was actually the thesis of this book, which is that once you figure out what assets you have, then you can exploit those assets and actually start generating new revenues. And you might actually find with this project that you're able to find revenues that people thought were impossible to find in such a short period.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know how well you know KwaZulu-Natal, but the Ulundi, which is not a major big town, it's an important town for us as KwaZulu-Natal, but it's not a huge, massive metropolis.
Sure.
We own over 1,000 houses as a Department of Public Works that we inherited from the old Zululand government.
This is fascinating. I mean, my mind just boggles when I think of this at a national level, because if we thought of this as a country, we probably don't even know how much untapped capital we have in our hands.
We found, this one we did know about, but there's a derelict hotel in Durban. We have called the Palm Beach Hotel that belongs to the Department of Public Works. You know, so every now and then, someone asked me the other day, will I ever write a book about my experiences? And I said, well, the book will be titled Now What? Because that's how I start every day. They come into my office, I was like,
by the way, you own a hotel. So you're basically the biggest property mogul in KZN.
So I always say there's a bit tongue in the cheek. I'm the biggest rate payer in KwaZulu-Natal. That's the good news. The bad news is I'm the biggest rates defaulter in KZN because we are struggling to pay our rates. but anyway, to get back to the second phase then that we're going to look at is, if we're not going to use these buildings, how can we use these properties to the benefit of the people of KwaZulu-Natal? So let's take a small town like Nongoma, and you have NPOs, NGOs who can't pay rent in buildings because they're limited. So we say, all right, can we have a one-stop shop? We have a building there in Nongoma in the town center. We make this building available. We say to 4 NPOs or 10 NPOs, move into this building, have your offices there. People can come get their services in one place. We give it to you on a 10-year lease at a minimal to no cost. You just have to pay the rates on it. And people now get a service from it. Another example is we own empty parcels of land across the province. And food security is a major challenge for not only KZN, but for the whole of South Africa. So we're now partnering with the Department of Agriculture, saying, all right, we do need this land in future, maybe for houses or whatever. That's why we own them. But we're going to then go to the community, form a co-op or whatever the community decides with the people living around this parcel of land. Agriculture will come in, teach them about food gardens, provide them with the seeds and everything like that. And we say, all right, we'll give you a year-to-year lease. Turn this open piece of land into a food garden. Feed the community. What is extra you sell onto the to market? We'll bring in companies like Spar and the others to say, okay, can you possibly buy that whatever is grown there, and so make that empty piece of land actually work for the people of KwaZulu-Natal. And then the third step is, if none of that can work, is we will then either through long-term leases or sale get rid of properties that we just do not need.
You can just sell them and Another thing you've instituted is opening up bid committees and creating transparency through recording those committees. Talk us through the thinking there and whether you think it's started to bear fruit.
So it's quite weird how things you think is logical seems to not be that logical. And that's one of the first things we did. We said, all right, we have a lot of problems. It's actually 2 committees. It was the bid committees and then for job interviews.
Right.
And we said both of these, we've set up a specific room in our head office that's got audio visual recording, and we use AI and all other kinds of fancy stuff. And all these are now fully recorded. Nothing can happen there that we don't know about. And it doesn't mean I now go and check whatever happens. We keep that in a very safe and secure methods.
Right.
But if ever there's now a question, we can say, well, it's quite easy for us to go and see what happened in our bid committee. We pull up those recordings and we look at it.
So it's held. It's not necessarily public, but you have access to it.
But we have access to it, and people can come and ask us if there's anything.
Yeah.
And it is working, because before we did that, each and every bid awarded by the department went to an appeal. Everyone went to appeal. Since we instituted it, we've not had one appeal against a bid that was instituted by the department.
Saving you money then as well.
Saves us money. It means, because once you have an appeal, everything stops. We can't be on site doing the work. So we think yes, it doesn't close the door 100%.
Sure.
Because I can only control what happens inside that room. I can't control what happens outside of that room, unfortunately.
Sure.
But I think because transparency is one of the keystones of this department now. And we've done everything in our power to say that whatever we do in the light. Because nothing bad can happen if a light is shown on it. Sorry, my English data's run out. And we welcome media and everybody. It's like, if you have questions, come to us. We are willing to always open up and say, this is what's happening, within the confines of the law. And that's why we started recording these things, because we feel it's very important that people must know that there's nothing being hidden in our department. Because a hammer on this, it's called Public Works because it belongs to the public. And we will make sure the public knows exactly what we're doing as a department.
Definitely. Another thing one would hope that other people start replicating.
Absolutely. We've already had other parts of the province asking us to use the room we've set up. So we've made this available for other departments if we're not using it. So yes, nice. More than welcome. And we will assist them in setting those up in their office as well, since we're responsible for all their buildings anyway. I know the national government, National Department of Public Works and Infrastructure is also now instituting a very similar thing. So I think it's being replicated across the country now. I've had MECs of other provinces asking us how did we do it, because they would like to do the same thing there. So I think it is definitely a game changer in how we do bids in South Africa now.
How stable do you feel the government is? Because you have this very slim majority. It's an unlikely coalition, and there are national dynamics as well. How are you feeling the stability of the coalition is holding up?
So I think first it's very important to remember that the GPU and GNU do totally separate things. It's totally separate arrangements between the political parties. So the stability of the GNU, whether it's great or not, does not impact on the GPU at all.
Interesting.
It's two very separate things.
So you think if the national broke apart, you'd be able to keep...
We would be able to keep the provincial government. Not that I'm thinking that I think the national government will last for a long time.
Sure.
And it's also important to remember that the biggest party is the IFP, not the ANC, which is the anchor, and the GNU is the ANC with us. And the three top parties, if we just leave out the NFP for a second, the votes are actually quite close to one another. I think it's 18%, 17%, 13%, and then the NFP with their one seat.
Sure.
So it's almost an equal party. So the makeup of the executive is the IFP has 4 members in the executive, including the Premier, obviously. The ANC has 3, the DA has got 2, and the NFP has got 1 member of the executive. Which means also no one party has a majority in the executive. So 2 parties together can hold the majority, but no one party has the majority in our executive. And it was an interesting dynamic. It was quite strange sitting in a cabinet meeting and the person sitting next to me I used to criticize vehemently when I was in opposition. Now we're in government together, and that was a totally new dynamic. But I think we found each other. I personally, this is not just Martin Meyer speaking, I believe that coalition is the best form of democracy. Because I think then you have checks and balances within your government as well. It also makes your parliament much more powerful in its oversight over the executive. So I'm a firm believer in coalition governments. I think it's the way to go. I think it shows that we are maturing as a country and our democracy is maturing. But it's also a very difficult form of government. It's a hard form of government because you have to compromise. Politicians don't love compromising, but it's something we have to do. But the best part of it is that 4 different parties forming part of the GPU come with our own values, come with our own policies. We now discuss it. We come with suggestions. And now, where in the past you would just immediately dismiss something another party says, now we have to listen to each other. And we say to ourselves, actually, that's a very good idea. And I think we are much stronger as a government now because we come with 4 different parties' views. We discuss it in cabinet and we find each other. And we've not had, and I can say this with absolute honesty, we've not had one serious fight in our cabinet. We had big disagreement. I personally feel the GPU is very stable. Members of the opposition, there's only 2 opposition parties in KZN, and they might feel differently about the future of the GPU. But the GPU, I think, is very, very stable. We've not had very serious challenges to us as a government. Internally, yes, we do have our disagreements. That's the strength of it. That's not a weakness. It's a strength for us to have our disagreements. How we handle these disagreements that matter. And I'm sure not all my colleagues like everything I'm doing in my department. I sure don't like everything they're doing in their departments, but that's the nature of it. But we manage to talk about it, we manage to find ourselves each other, and we get along. And I think the GPU will last until the next national elections.
You're having a conference to bring together different stakeholders around questions of infrastructure in KZN. Talk us through why you think this is an important initiative.
So this is very much linked to what we spoke about earlier about all these properties that we own across the province. And we're not the only one. The government owns thousands of properties. Municipalities owns thousands of properties. And we said, all right, instead of us all trying to do our little bit there, let's bring everybody together, including the private sector, the business forums, your big role players in construction and in the real estate enterprises. We bring them all together in one roof. And what we're going to do there is we're going to say, all right, here's our portfolio. What do we need to do with this portfolio? What is your needs as a private sector? What's your needs as the civil society? How can we find each other? All the municipalities will be represented and they will do the same. They say, well, here's what we own. And the whole idea of this conference is going to be a 2-day conference. We call it the Build KZN Better Conference. And the whole idea is for us to now say, okay, instead of everybody doing it a little bit, let's talk the same language. And we want to leave that room with some very real deals being done there, saying this is what we're going to do with it. Very important for me personally as well and for our department but we also want to make sure that the disadvantaged communities in KZN is benefiting from it. So we'll be in talks with finance institutions, banks, and all of that, saying, but all right, we need to be able to make sure that the people who are disadvantaged don't get pushed out of this market. They should also be able to buy these properties from us or develop these properties or go into leases with us, whatever the case might be. So we really want to change the way we look at land ownership within the province that government owns, and we really need to bring the private sector on board. Because the reality is, KZN has a 9 billion rand deficit. We don't have the money to provide the services people need. We're going to have to bring the private sector on board. We're going to have to bring in foreign investment if we want to develop our province, and that's part of what we're doing in this conference.
As an individual, you were letting me know in terms of your identity, it's been interesting coming into government. You're a white man, firstly.
I've noticed.
Sorry to break it to you. An Afrikaans man.
I am indeed.
And you're
yes.
an openly gay man.
Yeah.
And this is in a province that's quite conservative, majority black. What has that been like? And again, I think it's an important message that you send as an openly gay man in public office, to be open about that. I think of someone like Justice Edwin Cameron, who played an important role in the judiciary. How has your identity been important for you, and why have you been keen to be public about particularly being an openly gay man?
Yeah, and I think South Africa has a long history. There's a long line of openly gay people that played a vital role in the fight against apartheid, for instance.
Absolutely.
And I think it is important for us to continue that. And representation matters. I live in a province where people are murdered every year for their sexuality, where corrective rape, I hate the term corrective rape because it's a terrible term. It's rape, it's a crime. But it still happens every year in our province.
Absolutely.
And I think it's very important for people of the LGBTIQ community in our province and across the country to know, but it's okay. People can reach office. There's someone that can be a voice for us. Someone I can go and speak to, maybe email or say that, we're facing these challenges. So even though I will never say I was elected by all the LGBTI people in the province, definitely not. But I do have a job to represent them as well. It's my duty as a member of the community to represent them. And representation is very important. Young people in our province are going through a terrible time if they come out. Bullying in schools are still rife. And it is something that we need to tackle. And I have the support, luckily, of the rest of the government as well. Being in KZN, I mean, when I got sworn in, social media had very mixed feelings about it.
Social media.
I got some vitriolic attacks when we first met the king and said, how dare a gay man go and meet the king, and things like that. But I'm also very aware that as a white person living in the suburbs, my experiences as a gay person is 100,000 times easier than a person maybe in a rural area or a township area or other areas where it's quite a big challenge.
Sure.
So getting a bit of hate on social media, that doesn't bother me. My life has never been threatened, for being gay. But I think it's very important for people to be able to stand up and say, yes, I am a member of the LGBTIQ community. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It doesn't form where I am. I don't do my job any different because I'm gay than I would have if I was straight. I still do my job in exactly the same way. But that it's important for us to speak up and say South Africa needs to move forward. And not only in South Africa. We have my rights are guaranteed. Unfortunately, I have friends in places like Uganda, Ghana, and other countries where your life is threatened by your very own government, that you can be jailed for this. Africa, unfortunately, has a terrible track record, as do other countries in the Middle East and other places. So it's important for South Africa to be a beacon for people of the LGBTIQ community, to stand up and say, no, we have to fight for all South Africans. All South Africans have rights in this country, and that who I love does not impact on how I do my job. Absolutely. But I just on a bit of a lighter note, when I first got elected as a councillor, I represented a DA at Durban Pride, and it was on the front page of the Mercury.
Yeah.
And I was just a councillor for a month at that stage, newly elected fresh in Morningside in Durban. And I had to go address Old Age Home, massive Old Age Home of 600 people.
Right.
And this one lady said, we need to speak to you afterwards. And there was this group of a couple of people there.
Yeah.
And she said, Councillor, we read in the newspaper that you are a homosexual. Is this true? So I'm like, okay, so here it comes. I was like, no, it is true.
Yeah.
And they gave each other this knowing look.
Yeah.
And then she said something very important, and please excuse the slur, but she said, we discussed it, and we don't mind that you're a poofter as long as you do the job. And at the end of the day, South Africans don't care so much about their politicians' private lives as do the Americans, for instance, or the British.
Yeah.
Because people just want service delivery.
Absolutely.
Who I love.
Absolutely.
Doesn't matter to people as much as long as they do the job properly. And I think that's a very important thing. So while representation does matter, I think South Africans also are not too phased on whether I love a person of the same gender as myself or those type of things.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see until the first sex scandal, but there's not going to be any of those. So.
Well, yeah. Gee, I'm just thinking you've had some really fascinating experiences in public offices, from old age homes to white polos. And
I always say to people, it is the worst, best job in the world. There's always something new, and my personality is just like I always try and find something to laugh about and what happens. I think it's important for us to laugh.
Yeah, for sure.
And to find the joy in it, because if I'm not going to enjoy what I'm doing, then I'm not going to do it well.
True.
So I do try and find some joy in it.
Yeah, in this wonderful, terrifying country of ours, if you don't laugh, you'll cry. Hey? So,
Exactly.
Plans for the future? Could we see you rising to higher office in KZN or in the country?
Listen, right now, I'm very much focused on the task ahead of me, and that is turning the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure around, which we've done amazing work in. In what we've achieved in 6 months, not me, the team, is absolutely spectacular. But there's a lot still to be done. It takes 24 hours of my day, and that's all I'm focused on. I know it's a bit of a joke as South Africa, if the structures call me, it works slightly different in my party. But once Congress has come around, then we have those discussions, all of that. But right now, for me, I've never been a person that just wants to raise to positions just purely for positions. I have a job to do. The party gave me this wonderful opportunity, and it's a great honor to serve the people and the party in this position. And that's what I'm focused on right now. So no, I'm definitely not challenging anyone for any leadership positions. At this moment. I think the Democratic Alliance also wonderfully, we have a very robust internal democratic system. We don't just appoint deputy leaders, suddenly change our constitution and appoint people as a deputy leader of a party. We very much have a robust internal democracy that is great. I've been through some bruising internal elections myself. Some you win, some you lose. And I think that makes us stronger as a party. And I always say to people, if a political party can't have democracy internally, don't trust them with your democracy externally. So yeah, we'll see. I'm not quite sure when our congresses even are. I haven't kept an eye on it, but when that happens, then we'll have those discussions at that time.
Well, we spoke to Helen Ziller last year, and she said she thinks somewhere around 26. So
probably, if I remember when the last one is, I think our provincial congress should also probably be later this year or early next year.
Right.
And ours is usually synced quite closely to the federal one, so it should probably be around there.
Yeah.
And I wish the people that want to serve the party in high positions well, whether it's me or not. At this stage, I'm focused on one thing only: turning around public works.
Martin Meyer, thank you so much for joining us on SMWX, and all the best with your work for the future.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was lovely being here.
Thank you. Like, share, subscribe. Help us get to 200,000 subscribers, and keep it locked on SMWX. Aye.